Here we are, it's September 15th. We are in our SCIM interest group meeting and we have a whole bunch of mailing list stuff to cover. I have a HackMD here that has nothing in it yet, but will hopefully be our notes. I won't be quite as good a chair as Nancy. Nancy can't make it, so I'll do my best to play her on TV. Let me share this. We can get started here. All right. Let's just get our attendees in here. Excuse me, sorry. All right, so where do we want to review Nancy's email first? So,
sounds like a plan.
Hold on. Does everyone have access to this HackMD just so they can get in here and get us going? You see there's still people arriving, so that's pretty good. All right, I think we're ready to go. So from as far as agenda goes then, just to make sure others can add agenda items if we need them, we have list correspondence from Nancy, Roman, and then Janelle and Phil, right? I think this is our only goal for today, is to get this charter, to get a new revision of this charter put together and get it to the list. Does anyone disagree? All right.
Oops, I was going to say that's fine, but it's on mute.
Right. That's all right. You got everyone in here? Oh, we need to actually admit Paul and Nick. There we go. Hey guys. We are already recording and we have so far a plan to just go through the mailing list correspondence that's listed here on the screen. Before I continue, is there anything else you all want to add or anything else we should be getting on this agenda?
I think this looks good, man.
All right, let's do this. Let me grab Nancy's email. Which I believe I have here, but for purposes of email privacy, I want to make sure I'm not running you through my actual inbox. It's a little embarrassing. Here we go.
If you need it, I can get it, Pam.
Oh, I think we're in good shape. Is that readable? I know
Yes.
you all can pull it up in your own time, but just so we're all looking at the same thing. So Nancy can't make it. She's noted that there are 2 suggested updates by Janelle and Phil, and then just so you all know, if you haven't seen it, Roman also added some update suggestions as well. So I think we have to rationalize those between ourselves here. So she's got the proposed text listed here. And let's see, Danny's not going to be able to make it, but I started recording just for you, Danny, because he's usually the one who remembers that we actually have to. Okay, so this is what we've got. We've got this piece here. We've got Roman's email, which I think is here. And we have a HackMD for the new joiners right here. And can you see the URL in the chat? Or do I need to reshare it for the new folks?
It wasn't in the chat when I joined, but I got it from the link tree.
Yeah, I just reposted the link for my email and Nancy's.
Okay, perfect. So those are the 3 things we need to run through here. Does someone have a sense of the chronology of whether we should be going through Nancy's, Janelle and Phil's proposed changes before we look at Romans, or whether we should start with yours. Roman, do you have a recommendation?
From my quick squint, and I'll take kind of other suggestion is, I think Nancy polished the bulleted list, which is actually the meat of what the group is talking about doing. I, on the other hand, focused on the preamble, the three paragraphs that teed it up.
Oh, okay. So maybe we can concatenate and end up with a good option then. I think these, so I'm going to start a new HackMD for a third draft of this charter so that we keep the original. Does that also work for folks?
Yeah. I should also say I need to change one of my changes.
Oh, all right.
It doesn't make sense. Nancy was very faithful and put my erroneous change verbatim.
Oh, I see.
Full. So I take full credit for the bad wording.
All right. Here, you guys, I will create this. You don't have to necessarily watch me. Well, I guess we're going to paste right in right now, so we pretty well do, right? Draft, that will do. All right, so I'm going to copy this in. What have I forgotten? Sorry, now you're having to watch me do this. I should be able to select a new folder. All right, I'll do this in the meantime. Maybe what we can do, I'll get this set up. If somebody else wants to just put up, then should we do let's do the text first then, I think, right? Given it's sort of ahead of it opens up the bullets. Should we do that first? Do we want to just paste this text into that HackMD as soon as I figure out how to make it work? There.
Sure, why not?
Let's do it. There we go. All right, and paste that file in. Okay, here's our third draft file in the chat, empty. And I'm just going to paste in, I'm going to start with pasting in, Roman, your text. So if I pass through here, I'm going to take the ref replacement text here. Let me know if this is what we should be doing here.
Yeah, I think you're highlighting too much text. So so my emails provided, I think, kind of snippets for, yeah, exactly, one paragraph at a time.
All right.
I did it in the most IETF way possible, but the most ineffective to actually collaboratively edit text.
All right, I'm just going to paste this in so that people can start working with it in the file. I don't see anyone else in the file right now, but I think once we see sort of the replace text, then we can look at it. I'll change it in a minute to point to the new text. Okay, so you've got questions in here too, right? That you want us to look at? So do we want to go through paragraph by paragraph? And do we
whatever's most helpful.
Okay, so let me just change the share here to show the 3 paragraphs of text here together, and then we can go through your notes. How's that?
Sounds great.
Definitely open to alternate points. There we go. All right, so these are the 3 paragraphs pasted from your rough replacement text. So maybe we could just take a second and look through that. And I'll add all the Chrome around it in a second.
Yeah, I'll let everyone read it and then I can voice over why I'm proposing those changes.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, does anyone want a little more time before I start kind of talking over what I was thinking?
Go ahead for me.
Okay,
Yeah.
not hearing objections. So my suggestion with the first paragraph is, again, it's editorial. Primarily, one of the big feedbacks that always comes up when you do kind of documents is be really precise on why you're bringing the working group back and be clear on the citation. So all you're seeing here is me putting the RFCs earlier in the document, the references, and also being clear that SCIM is both a protocol and a schema. And then just finessing editorially, since its publication, I changed the word order. That's it. Then on the second paragraph, this was a little bit more substantive. So I was tripping over, frankly, the use of a lot of the different standard maturity keywords about internet standard, uppercase, internet process, lowercase, informational documents actually can't become internet kind of standards. And so I try to tighten this up just to be clear and a little bit vaguer at the same time to say, listen, the first thing that the working group is going to do is take all of the experience we had from the last 6 years of fielding and deployment and just put that into a revision of the base protocol and schema, and being silent on any other details beyond saying that's the first goal. Then the third paragraph, I morphed a little bit to talk about, listen, from that implementation experience, we learned about new use cases and new requirements. We want to make sure we wrote them down. And I generalized what the additional extensions could look like. I felt like we were very prescriptive about it's only going to be PS, proposed kind of standards. And I wanted to, and this is kind of a question, but I put the text here with an answer, which is, we wouldn't entertain experimental or informational extensions. And so I felt like that was an unneeded level of kind of precision and specificity that may hamstring us in future iterations. And so that's what the polish is there. And that's it.
I like that. I like the removal of that specificity so that we give ourselves the flexibility if we ultimately do want it to think about information or experimental additions.
I'm not sure where that came from.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Probably.
So are we
Experimental specs are always controversial, no matter what the charter says.
Yep, very true. I like this. I think it's really clear.
Yeah, what I found, again, I don't have a lot of experience with SCIM, but my personal experience is actually less with experimental, but with informational. It may often be the case that you come up with a profile and it just becomes a little controversial. Well, I mean, if we say it's a proposed standard profile, that invites a whole level of scrutiny versus we're not really sure this is a way, we're not sure whether it's the way, but we feel like we should publish it. And going informational gives us the opening to do that.
I think we had a discussion that we may want to produce a best practices document along the lines, because it avoids versioning issues of the main protocols, and then when the protocols do change, the best practice sort of keeps referencing the latest versions. I'm not expecting it to be like TLS though, but I found with the OAuth working group, the use of a best practice has actually been a good thing, and it often leads to specs.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that sounds like good stuff that's happened in OAuth. What I will say is, I think nothing I proposed here and in the original text suggests that there's a BCP coming. So if we want that, we will have to inject that with new text.
I think there is a mention in the items down below. I'll just look for it.
Yeah, I believe there is a bullet there. However,
okay.
I at least the way we discussed it last meeting was basically that would kind of be the last thing, right? That we would have the use cases done. We would have, we would know what was changed in the schema. All of that would have to be done before we could think about writing implementation guidance.
So, like one of the issues that's sort of coming out in the discussion is there's a group of people that want to do data reconciliation with a feature that doesn't exist. They want to do polling and then do stateful paged polling as a poor man's way to synchronize systems. And two problems come up is one is the service provider, because the spec says it as an example, sets a result limit, the maximum number of resources you can return is 1,000. And that was picked out of the air. It was, the whole point was to say it could be limited and clients have to react correctly. And everybody's acting as if it must be limited. So to me, a best practice document sort of talks about why you might set a limit, that the limit isn't fixed for the entire server. It might be assigned based on a role or something like that. So there's a number of things we can talk about that are permitted in the spec that people aren't realizing. And then what are the issues if you are downloading the entire data set, all the users in a server, there are security concerns. So there's some things to say about that. It's something in the back of my mind that we should be talking about because people are just trying to make things work without thinking about the security risks, the costs, and so forth.
Makes sense. So let me ask a question. I mean, we've got a ton of work just to get to the revision of this protocol, the revision of the use cases, and the, whatever extension review work we end up doing. I think there's probably a year's worth of work there, easily. And so, if that being the case,
anything we do is 2 years, 2 to 3 years.
Fair enough. I say one. It's, you're right. You're right. So, so I think the question is, do we try to really focus on that first year or first 2 years?
I think that line of thinking is really helpful. I would say anything we think is controversial right now, we do not put in the charter. There is a ton of work, and we can always recharter to catch it after we've had enough time in an actual working group to figure out what we want to do and how we want to do it.
I'll say that. I totally agree with that. One issue I am having, though, is we did a lot of work in the previous group to set up things for synchronization. And what's starting to happen is negative patterns are emerging that people want to formalize. I'm being very harsh than I need to be, but I'm sort of learning that by saying, okay, there isn't consensus, the problem's getting worse. So I do want to say that while we haven't fully quantified synchronization and coordination between domains, it's a strong issue, and we did a lot of the group did side work and the security events work to set the foundation for that to happen. And so I'd like to bring that forward. And I think it is fair to first build a consensus on what is the exact objective. Is it replication? Is it coordination? What is it, and what do we mean by that? So we have to pick up. I have to help. I want to help bring the group. Familiarize the group with the information that was done before, and then we reestablish consensus on the approach and then move it forward. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it's a solved issue at all. There's lots of widely varying opinions, but I think it's an urgent need to work on consensus on the approach, get a proposal for the approach, and if any of those meet consensus, then we adopt it. So, Roman, I'm not sure what we should actually put in the charter at this stage.
Well, I mean,
that's kind of what I was.
I mean, what you're saying, what I guess I'm hearing is, do we need a marker, which is somewhere in that bulleted list that says that a BCP is coming on operational considerations, parentheses, example, topics, and I didn't catch the full list you were talking about, like synchronization and the rest of it. So all we need to say is the things we probably want to talk about in the document, but we have to have zero consensus on how to solve it. And it may turn out after discussion that like the best practice is there's nothing we can really tell you, caution, and that's it. But again, we get to charter with that item.
Let me rephrase it. I've seen a number of requests to modify the spec that don't really need to modify the spec.
Okay.
What they can be done, they can break down there may be, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are things that we may say, okay, we need to revise the spec because this is just wrong or this is causing problems. But a lot of times it just clarification is needed, an expansion on, for example, why are there size limits on returns? We need more explanation of that. We need some explanation of the use of preconditions, which is part of the HTTP spec, and current RFC only refers to the minimum of what it needs to do to make it possible. In other words, we talk about E-tags. Well, what are E-tags? They're part of preconditions. So I think developers are looking for clarification of, okay, so how would you use that? And it obviously, I've sort of did informal survey, and I don't think many people have implemented RFC 7232 and so on because that hadn't occurred to them.
So if I heard the conversation, as I kind of understand the current drafts and what you just said, and I saw text in the working group to provide additional clarity for what you just described, I would say that that's already in scope for the existing tech. I think you can, for the existing charter language, I think you can drive a truck through the current language, which says to codify implementation experience and the rest of it, because what you're saying is the implementers ain't saying this is a problem. And so it seems like we could be able to catch that both in the base spec or the protocol, the schema spec, the protocol spec. The question is, do we want to put a marker for a separate document to make it different? That's what
I'm just,
right.
That's my question is I'm not sure. It's not clear to me that the base specs need to be updated. We did have a conversation that we may want to move them to the next step, which is a different thing. And that step may or may not involve revision. But by next step, I mean the next step in the standardization process, because formally 76, 43, and 44 are still standard proposals. It's not clear to me what the outcome of all that work is, whether that's a revision to 76, 43, and 44, or whether it's a BCP.
I think what we are explicitly saying, the way the charter is written, is that there is a rev of 34 and 35 coming, or is it, sorry, do I have my numbers wrong? The protocol and the schema. That's what the text says
76, 43, and 44.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that there are normative changes, just clarification. So does that, I thought you shouldn't really be issuing a new revision for those kinds of things.
Well,
something I would, I don't know, you probably have more experience there.
But Phil, weren't you just saying that you thought some of the synchronization stuff would result in changes to the preconditions and things like that?
No, synchronization is a completely separate topic, and it's a new enhancement and new RFC work. It wouldn't go in the core specs. Okay,
because I think there are other people who might disagree there. At least I know that there are a few people who want to look at, for example, whether or at least on the pagination front, changing some of the stuff.
We've yet to have anybody, there's been a few people who say you got to have it no matter what. And then you say, well, why do you need it? I need it for synchronization. So they're jumping the gun and saying this is the only solution that's possible without hearing draft proposals. And I laid out quite a lot of text that says why it's a really, really bad idea. And yet people say, well, that's fine. I don't need it for synchronization. I need it for lots of other cases. Well, okay, let's get the lots of other cases on the table. because stateful paging, no matter what, is a costly item.
It is. Yeah, I agree. I think that there is a discussion happening on the mailing list that is in several different threads, because I wasn't sure whether we should officially start like, hey, here's a call for anyone who has any pagination use cases. But there's a few like discussions in various threads about it. And yeah, like Phil is saying, it feels like people want to have it. It's like comfortable to have it, but then they're not able to say, okay, here's why I need it. And I think it might actually go back to the fact that the existing spec has it in it, right? And so there might be kind of a backwards compatibility concern, which no one's actually brought up, and I don't want to like lead the witness, so to speak, but I mean, let's just have a real discussion about it, because I think that if somebody does come up with a really good use case, I'm all ears. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Phil, I can commit to you on the Cisco side to make sure that that we talk to some of the people that brought that issue up for sure, and see what those use cases are that were driving the request.
That would be great.
We certainly have needs for pagination. We see it all the time, but they are more. An example is in different wizards where you're building interoperability potentially between two platforms. One specific use case is you may not want to synchronize all users, but when you present back, from one platform to another, a GET request in the SCIM user API, you don't want back, thousands of users. Now the existing protocol, right, allows you to do that. So I want to double check, from a couple of our engineers where they felt like that was deficient, or what other use cases for sure.
Can I just, sorry.
I just want to jump in there.
Great. Sorry, I just wanted, like, is now the right time for me to or for someone, I think it would be me, because I've been kind of championing this, to just start a new thread on the mailing list and say, okay, here's all of the things that we've talked about on this pagination topic, and say, let's use this thread for anyone to post additional use cases, and that would give Cisco a place to put theirs. Is now a good time to do that?
What I think, I just want to add, and I think this is the topic is sort of interwoven and complex enough that we kind of need. This is the kind of thing we want to discuss at face to face or on Zoom with all the interested parties. But I would like to get people to first put on the list what their use case is. Are they driving a UI?
Yep.
What are the other things? And so, for example, I put on the list saying they want stateful paging because they can only get 1,000 results, but the spec doesn't say that. Spec says they could be limited to 1,000, but that certainly leaves wide open that an administrative synchronization account could be able to download the entire server all in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
That's actually what we discussed when the original working group designed the draft. They said, how are we going to bootstrap a server? Well, the first time you simply do a GET and you download 20 gigabytes of data all in one call, because HTTP is good at that. And people are saying, well, I can't do that because I'm limited to 1,000. Well, talk to your administrator and get the limit taken off. And they're saying, well, that's just not valid. I would never do that. Well, then what's the difference? If you download 1 million users via 1,000 pages, or you download them all in one, it's the same information loss that people are concerned about.
So can I suggest that we go back to the charter here? I mean, all of this is awesome and we have to discuss it. If we don't get chartered, we have a first order problem.
So this is what I'm struck by, that one of the important cases is synchronization, but I want to keep, there is overlap between paging and synchronization, because paging is one possible method for synchronization. But I want to keep them separate, and one doesn't preclude the other. And both of those both of those deliverables in the charter need to have consensus on what's the objective, what's the problem being solved. And that the way to do that might be to first achieve consensus by putting them in the use case document. And then the next step will be, and Roman, I don't know what's best here, is that we expect that the charter would be revised that says we're now taking the next step and we're delivering synchronization based on this model or this use case, and we're looking for proposals based on that.
Yeah, I'll confess, I don't understand the details enough, but from the outside, it feels like we're trying to engineer too much of the solution and know too much about what the solution space would look like before we put it on the charter to say we're going to talk about it. I would encourage us, I'm constrained by timing, right? I want to get a working group by IETF 112, ideally. And so I'm trying to come up with, sufficient specificity on topics we commit to work on, but we have no idea potentially on how to engineer the solution for it. And we can all agree that yes, when we have a working group, we are going to discuss solutions to the bitter end, and we're going to get kind of consensus. And I don't know where the line is about how much we need to talk about the things we all agree we want to work on, but we don't know how to address them, and how much of that needs to be done upfront in the charter thinking. Because kind of this idea of kind of paging versus not, to me, it seems like we can practically solve this in one or two ways. We can abstract the current language about paging and just say, we're going to work on synchronization, and we drop the reference drafts that are in there that may be suggesting solutions that are causing heartburn, right?
You could, under the synchronization approach, put, there is no paging draft. So to avoid the confusion, there is a multi-value paging thing. That's a different thing.
Oh,
so
okay.
Paging, the normal
clarifying.
SCIM paging allows you to page through result sets. Multi-value paging says, okay, I got a group with 1 million members. I don't need to know all 1 million. I only want the first 1,000 members of that multi-valued attribute. Or I only want members based on a filter that correspond to this. So I only want phone numbers of type home. So that's actually what that draft does. It's very different from entity paging. This is value paging.
Got it. Yeah, straight up, I didn't read it. So given that we know so little about what we want to do here, and it doesn't look like we have even really represented it in the current charter, I think we have enough scope to talk about it in a future working group, because it again sounds like we have an opening to discuss new use cases. And if we want to put synchronization explicitly as one of those things we'll discuss, kind of by all means. And then that gives us the opening to talk about it. And if it turns out we want to do something, we can recharter for it.
Yeah. I'd like to see that the group firmly makes a decision on the use case first before we dive in.
And I think what I'll ask the team specifically on, Phil, is just like, hey, in the existing pagination scope, right? Or in the pagination parts of the draft, what's missing there? So that we can either bucket it into this bigger topic of synchronization, or we can bucket it into just changing the existing spec, which is consistent with that first or second paragraph. I can't remember which one. Second paragraph.
I don't think the existing spec needs to be changed for either feature. Can't remember, Matt, did you write a spec for stateful paging?
Not
really.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about stateful paging per se. So right. That's what I want to double check, with.
So there's if somebody wanted stateful paging, that would likely be a new draft, right, where you specifying a new parameter for SCIM that's a cursor essentially, and that combined with the existing spec gives you stateful paging. So it by itself is not a need to revise 7644. You would just add a new feature to it.
Right.
And that makes that very concise. And it would be actually easy to spec. My concern is that it's not easy to operate.
So we need to get, so we are rat holing on synchronization and paging here.
Yep.
I think, I think the proposal on the table is for us to have the discussions as part of this, but know that if we want to make any really big bucket changes, we would actually propose a recharter at that time, because right now we don't know what those big bucket changes would be.
Yep.
Is that right?
I think that's right, Pam.
Okay.
I think the charter just needs to be like on synchronization. I think people might get a little calmer if we say, so events is one possibility, and you could say stateful paging is another. You're saying the question is still open.
You want that in the charter?
Well, those are informational items in the charter. So the deliverable will be coordination of synchronization of entities between domains. That's the charter deliverable. And then you're just referencing current ideas or current drafts that are available. And so the ID events work is something that the group did a lot of work on 4 years ago. We should try to pick that up. We're not obliged to pick it up. And then we should also mention the technique of state cursor-based paging, which has been proposed as an alternate. And it's for the purpose of synchronization. And then the question of cursor-based paging for UIs or other use cases, that needs to be understood as to what the deliverable is before we can even put it in the charter. That's my sort of concern.
If we don't understand the deliverable, should it even go in the charter? Like, I think the fact that we're chartering the discussion is as far as we can go, right?
I think in terms of IETF process, we don't need to charter items that we're just going to talk about. We have the flexibility in the working group to talk about the future direction of anything, and we don't need that as a charter item. The times we would need a charter item is if we have now enough specificity and, we want to go forward with a document and it's new scope, and we want to agree upon that scope.
I just want to respond to the negative consensus on. I'm worried we won't get consensus if we don't have stateful paging. And I don't think yet it's a deliverable we need to do. I just not process-wise, it just feels like cart before the horse in the sense that you're proposing a technology solution for a problem that isn't defined.
Okay, well, we have lots of defined problems, and we know we can have this discussion to decide whether there is another defined problem, which is stateful paging, right?
Yeah.
I mean, can we do that? Like, I know it'd be nice to get some specificity here, but I think there's a desire for specificity without the actual specificity yet, right? I mean, but if Roman's saying that we can do that without getting in the charter, then I think everyone here, I think agrees that this is an issue that the community wants to discuss and wants to get to the bottom of, right? I mean, is there anyone here who would disagree with that statement?
No, it's
okay. So I think the question is, do we need a touchstone in the charter for people to know that we haven't forgotten about it, right? Is that required, or is that something that we can, have unspoken? Because right now, I mean, Roman's right. This is what you're seeing here is Nancy's post of the existing bullets, right? And I'm just adding the bullets back in because I'm pasting from email, but this is what we have now, and it is very specific, and it's quite different for, this preamble, I think, can fly no matter what. I think the real question we have left in our last 15 minutes is whether we want the bullets to stay with Nancy's revision that incorporates, I think, both Janelle's and Phil, your
Yeah.
stuff, or whether we can remove yet again more stuff.
I think they're fine. I'm going to look at the text and try to suggest some more edits to appropriately soften or
Right.
generalize so that people are more comfortable with it. And so I'll take a look offline. I don't like the way the define a method for synchronization related between, like, that's not a sentence. So I want to fix that at minimum.
Okay, if you can get into the SAC-MD, this is the place to do it, I think. Okay, and then, so, however, Roman, I think you made some projections on what we could do with the bullets, right?
It was purely editorial, like nits.
Okay,
It was just, a little grammar thing here and there. It's not, it doesn't substantively change what's being proposed.
got it. Okay, then I can go through these and make sure that that this third draft addresses all of those nits then without, and it doesn't sound like the working group needs to vote or agree or anything like that, right? Okay.
Right. So so what we would need is we're seeing feedback to date about folks are comfortable with the text we have now. We have gotten some feedback that additional changes would be required. So what we want to just do is iterate on the places where folks said they would really like to see something slightly different, and then that's sufficient to move forward for the first IASG review. And the only other structural thing I need is, in addition to this prose-based approach, we also need actual milestones that we append to the charter. And I think in my email, I provided a kind of the rough format of what we would need.
All right, let me just, I think we have it right here. So in this same email?
Yeah, so it's just scroll a little further down, please, if you would mind.
All right, sorry, I'm trying not to make you all seasick.
Yeah, so that, like my last line, for example, we would say something like that. Yeah, the letter of the law on a charter is, by the time it gets approved, that it has both the description of the work and actual milestones.
Got it. All right, so if I add these down here, preferably not deleting people's stuff. So you and we literally need to have, I mean, milestones, and is there a number of them we need?
We're being recorded here, so I'm not going to say what we actually need here, but the spirit is we need some. I don't want to go on the record saying that we need 100% traceability between what the scope is and the milestones itself, because there's natural flex in that, sometimes you make a list, you want to talk about it, but it turns out, 3 of those are one document, and you didn't know that when you started. So practically you need some milestones to say you have milestones.
So you need a way to get started.
Yeah, exactly. So I think easy ones are, a marker for the revision to 7642, 43, maybe 44. And honestly, I'm not sure about how to decompose the rest of them.
Some of the other ones.
I made up the date, by the way, 2023 June. Don't stick to that unless you think it's real.
I think it would be fair to say it would take 2 or 3 meetings. There are 3 meetings in a year, so it takes, I would say in my experience, it'll take, like, for example, for synchronization, it'll take us at least a year to have a working group draft for the coordination of domains, a method for coordinating between domains. And then you start working on that draft. So so before 2023, hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have some individual drafts that we're talking about.
Okay.
Say maybe 2023 January, some individual drafts for individual drafts for the synchronization stuff. The deletion draft and multi-value paging, you already have IDs on the table. So you could set a goal of the fall of this year to adopt those or not.
And what year is it? 2021? So you're saying by December of 2021, decision on, I mean, is a decision a milestone or not?
Decision on IDs, decision to adopt soft delete and multi-value paging drafts.
Roman, I'm assuming you can help us make this more official, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, on that particular text to bike shed maybe a little too much, is that the no-go decision to work on that problem, or is that taking an individual proposal and adopting it in the working group?
In this case, we have two drafts that have been submitted a long time ago, but they didn't have a working group to discuss it.
Got it.
So I'm assuming it's going to take a meeting cycle or two to present it, have people discuss it. So if we present it at the next meeting, people say, okay, that's interesting. And then the following meeting, we adopt it or not. That's why I'm thinking that kind of timing. Because those are concrete proposals. And then I think 2022 would be for the first proposals to be accepted for synchronization.
Yeah, I use the language working group adoption of.
Oh, instead of decision.
Oh, up here?
Yeah.
Okay. But let me ask you this, is that really the first thing we want to work on? Like as much as they might be low-hanging fruit.
Well, no, we're going to do lots of other work on developing IDs for this, for example, for the synchronization. But there are no IDs to start with. So they're only ahead of the game because you have simple concrete proposals for soft delete and multi-value paging. So they shouldn't be controversial. It's not that they're more urgent or not. It's just that you have concrete proposals. They shouldn't be controversial, I don't think.
All right.
And synchronization was just the first item on the list because I'm interested in, and then there's all the other deliverables to go at, and we might not make the next summer for even the first set of IDs for synchronization.
All right. So I would put forward that we need to have the use cases done pretty darn soon, and so say by June of next year, we should be able to have a revision of 7642.
Yeah.
Would anyone disagree with that as a milestone?
No, I think that should be a priority. So yeah.
So that would give us 3/4 of a year to work on that, which I would love to say we won't need, but we're going to need it. Okay. So folks, does this, for the rest of the folks on the call, like where are your babies in here? Like I think that the PAM stuff is likely going to be a 2022. I mean, I think we would want to do working adoption of that reasonably soon as well, correct?
Yeah, I think that's right, Pam. So I think the first milestone there is around a revision of the Grizzle draft to incorporate some of the feedback we already got on the mailing list and then externally.
Okay.
So I don't know really how to assign timelines to any of this. So maybe I'll defer to you and Roman for. Yeah.
Is anybody familiar with the PAM draft? Do you think it's kind of like multi-value paging, that it's fairly straightforward, in which case it should go on with the soft delete and multi-value paging items for December?
Yeah, Phil, I'm not sure if you attended the session that Matt and I gave about the PAM draft, but
I missed it, unfortunately.
okay. Yeah, it was epic. You should definitely go back and watch that.
It is on YouTube. You can see it.
It is on YouTube. Matt will give you a personal review. No, I'm just kidding. But there are some major pain points with it. It needs I won't say an overhaul, but it definitely needs some doing. Yeah.
Well, December then might be early. Maybe you want to put that in March of 2022 or something.
Okay. Matt, jump in here if you've got different feelings on this.
Nope, I agree. I think that there's things that we need to look at in that draft that look like general problems being solved under the umbrella of a specific use case. And I think that's the major concern.
Yeah, and I think that's how we landed with the charter talking about PAM as a schema rather than PAM as I don't know, some other form of substandard. So, which I think makes sense as a subschema, as a schema rather. So, I think it's more about pulling out, thinking about how do we deal with some of those, as you put, general problems that are solved in a very PAM specific way, and seeing if it makes sense to bubble those up to the spec or not. So I think March seems reasonable to have those discussions and form a perspective on that.
Okay, so right now the really big one, which is this informational revision of, the really big one is going to be the revision of 76, 43, and 44, which we don't actually have in here, right?
Correct. And to be very clear, no one holds you to any of the deadlines you put, and everyone slips on them. So the spirit here is we have a marker, not that the marker is correct, that it's just the marker is credible.
We need a starting place, basically. So that means
I think
go ahead.
It's useful because when you start thinking in terms of meeting cycles and how far you're going to get each cycle, you sort of get the hint. It's at least June of 2023 before we get there.
So do we want to have an interim? Like right now, basically what we're saying is we're going to do a whole bunch of work, and in 2023 June, a new 7643/44 of some description will pop out.
Classic waterfall. It's a prey strategy. Yes.
All right. I'm good with it. If you're good with it. So essentially what we're saying is that in January, we will have finally come to some kind of decision. So if we go through this by quarter, right? So December of this year, we're going to look at soft delete and multi-valued paging as basically low valued fruit. And we'll be working on the 7642 work and the 7643/44 work, right? By March, we're going to have some sense of where we want to be with respect to privileged access management. By June of that year, so that's June of next year, we will hopefully have a working revision of 7642 that's going to give us terms. And then I have a placeholder here that doesn't mean anything. And then by January the following year, we think we're going to have some comprehensive synchronization or domain coordination guidance, whether that's a spec, an ID, a new ID, whatever. Yes, like they're coming up as individual drafts, so they could in theory be adopted from existing, or they could be proposed new, right? And then in June of 2023, we're going to have 4344 in some kind of shape, and that's either going to be publishing errata and pushing 4344 to the final status, or it's going to be an application for brand new IDs.
So,
right?
So 2022 June, where you've got XXX, should be a working group adoption of IDs for coordination synchronization. And then 2023 December for WGLC. I think that's optimistic.
December, you mean this one, this bottom one, 2023?
No, the other one
This
up
one.
above, January.
You think it should be December?
That would be, yeah, WGLC for the working group drafts on the same topic.
That's really depressing.
Well, I think I'm just being conservative because it's a big deliverable.
Right.
So I'm trying to make sure I can crosswalk the bulleted list and the pros with the milestones. So
Yeah.
I just want to make it clear, just to be clear, on the 2021 December, we're talking about a working group adopting a soft delete document, period. Same month, the working group adopting a multi-value paging document, period, right? Because if those are two documents, we should probably break that out. It shouldn't be the same milestone.
Got it. On it.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that the words in the pros are recognizable with the words we use in the milestones.
Yeah, the other thing we don't have in here is schema work, right? Or any kind of, that whole question of whether we want to look at deeper automation and get to real negotiated per attribute schema. I feel like that one needs to be sequenced a bit later in the mix. Partially because I think we don't know what we don't know. But I don't know, does anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
I think you got support for advanced automation scenarios. That's really part of your use case discussion. Is it not?
Yeah, it's definitely part of it.
Because that's sort of wide open. I'm not even sure it's in SCIM, whether it's an OAuth dynamic registration thing, for example.
I don't know. I do wonder if there are changes to the core spec.
Yeah.
One
of the best practice document items that we could be talking about is this question of using SCIM with OAuth. So there's no new musts and mays to be defined. You're just simply saying, hey, you can use OAuth tokens to access your SCIM API. And just talking about the issues of how do you get an OAuth client credential in order to get your service account access to a SCIM endpoint.
But isn't there changes to the discovery metadata at the very least? Like right now, there is no, as far as I remember, there is no mechanism to tell clients all of the things they need to know.
There was an old proposal for that, and nobody was interested in it. So we can bring that back on the table. If you look in the, I think if we look in the expired draft bin, you might find something.
Okay, because I thought I had all the drafts collected, but maybe not. Okay.
So
some of it may be wildly out of date because it was early discussions. Like anything before 2015, it's suspect. Sorry, Roman.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of comment a little bit on what keeps coming up, which is the open question: do we need to touch 7643 and 44? I'll confess, despite being an AD, I have not run the upgrade process many times, but my understanding is that it's not a matter of taking the old document and just saying, look, there's a lot of implementation, change the metadata. You do issue a new document number, and basically you make a BIS document and you bang on the errata and make those fixes, and then you move to get that revision updated. So even if we're saying, there's really nothing big we need to change, just the process of catching all of the errata is still a document update. And that gives us the opening to have a while to think about, do we need to open up the core document or not? I'm sure those on this call are actually a lot more familiar than I am with what the errata backlog is. But for something that's been around this long and it seems this big, it would seem there would be some.
So you don't think we need to quibble about whether there's a new dock or not? It's almost certainly going to be a new dock, right?
Yes. And frankly, the text already says we're making a new dock.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I was wrong. There was not a discovery thing. It wouldn't be much different than the way OAuth discovers.
Well, or OpenID Connect, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the same pattern. I'm forgetting what it's called. But it's really you're discovering, what we're talking about is discovering of authorization technique. Because if you know the SCIM endpoint, you can already discover the schema, you can already discover what resources it supports. That's already built in. It's a question of what authorization token do I need?
Okay. Okay. We are over time. I am going to format this then. So this is basically Roman's proposed text, Nancy's bullets, and then the milestones we've come up with here, and we'll put it to the list, or I will get Nancy to put it to the list so she does it with the proper prompt. Anyone want to add anything else before we drop off? Hey, I think this was great progress. We're getting there. We will get this thing working now if it kills us.
Thanks, Pam and Roman.
Thanks, Pam.
All right, cool.
Thank you, Pam.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Bye.